Game of Thrones, Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall. Let's do this. What's going on, guys? Professor of Thrones here, back again for another episode breakdown, and boy, do we have a lot to break down today, my friends. Before I even dive into the episode, yes, this is a new setting, this is a new environment, so to say. I'm back in Gainesville for one last semester of college before I graduate. Since this is a new environment, I'm probably going to be testing out different areas of the room, different angles to film from. So over the next few weeks, if you have any angle preferences you may see, feel free to comment below and I'll definitely take those into consideration. I'm just going to try to feel out the environment and setting and see which one works the best. But enough rambling about my life and changes in my life. If you want to see anything like that, go check out my vlogging channel, Joshua Adam 45, where I post a daily vlog every single day. Enough with plugging my other channels here. Let's get right into the episode, the reason why everyone's here. Right off the bat, I want to make note that the reason this review is coming so much farther after the vast majority of uploads is simply because I am an adamant refuser of watching leaks. I do not want to support the hackers. I would like to support the creators and HBO directly. Even though so many watched it, so they already technically won, I feel like I would be aiding in that victory if I did so through those means. Therefore, whenever it gets hacked and whenever it's leaked, you're always going to see my review in alignment with the actual airing of the episode. I wait for HBO. Now, speaking of reviews, the general consensus about this episode is extremely mixed, which is very perplexing to me. About 50% of people said it was an absolutely horrible, trash episode, while the other 50% said it's the best episode of the show. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best episodes. I wouldn't say it's the absolute strongest. To me, this episode is still beat out by Season 6, Episode 5, and Season 6, Episode 10, both of which are probably tied as my favorite episode. I can see this coming in third. I have to digest it more and think about it and thoroughly reflect on other episodes before I can make that claim. Now, just because this is one of my favorites does not mean it is without a lot of flaws. However, other than Arya's arc, all of these flaws are really nitpicky. Although I will be mentioning them here, please note that I love this episode and this is not meant to detriment my opinion in any way. The reason why I am so focused on finding these flaws and pointing them out is simply because I am such a huge fan. I've watched the episode twice and was able to notice more things. Essentially, I was able to turn off fan goggles and see the negatives that were buried within the gargantuan positives. Before even jumping into the arcs, I want to address the main issue that current fans have with the series. This has been going on all season, but it's gotten increasingly more prevalent with this episode. This is the issue of speed travel, which I even talked about last season. Characters are traveling between places across the world that are impossible to get to in such a short amount of time. Now, I understand the showrunners need to pick up the pace with the end of the show coming so soon. There are only 6 full episodes left after all. Pains me to say that, Jesus Christ. I really wouldn't have a problem with this whole speed travel issue if it weren't for its inconsistency. While some characters are jumping back and forth across the map constantly, other characters are taking their sweet time. They are taking a realistic amount of time to travel from place to place. This stark contrast makes it immensely jarring when people are able to travel at such speed. This is especially prevalent when you're comparing Jon to the White Walkers. We saw how fast the White Walkers could go, and since Season 5, they have been walking from Hardhome to Eastwatch. During that time, Jon has traveled to multiple locations across Westeros, all these distances much farther away from each other than Hardhome is to Eastwatch. That's just one example, but it's simply where the fan concern lies. I'm willing to overlook it, however, it is becoming increasingly noticeable, which unfortunately is a slight detriment to the overall viewing experience. However, that was not my biggest problem with this episode. My absolute biggest problem was the entire Winterfell arc. Every single character we saw in Winterfell this time around was acting completely ridiculous, out of touch with reality, completely out of character, especially Arya. Arya is acting like a hypocritical for lack of a better term, bitch. I legitimately can't tell if this is poor writing on the showrunner's behalf or if this is just Arya going absolutely off the deep end. She's literally gone insane. She's in this paradoxical cycle where she is so hell-bent and focused on defending her family and fighting for her family that she's willing to harm members of her family to protect other members of her family. I know this is all part of Littlefinger's scheme, but it's really, really weird. Arya's main conviction is avenging her family, so why would she turn against them at a moment's notice? She was antagonizing Sansa even before she found that note. But speaking of Littlefinger, this episode is dropping slight hints that we really don't know where his allegiances lie. Now, as to where his allegiances lie may not matter much since he's probably going to die very soon, especially if Bran gets involved in this whole situation. However, this episode does pose the question, is Littlefinger secretly still working for Cersei? Is he trying to turn the Stark children against each other to increase the fragility of Winterfell, allowing for southern forces to come in there and take it much easier? Especially with something I'll get to in a bit, this seems increasingly likely, although it could be completely far-fetched. And this new element that sort of amplifies this theory is a letter from Cersei to Sansa. She wants Sansa to attend a meeting in King's Landing. Now, it's very confusing and unclear whether this is the same meeting that Jon and Daenerys will be at with the White Walker and trying to come to agreement there. It could very well be, but it can also be a completely separate thing. And Sansa, especially with her huge brewing conflict with Arya, would be so stupid to stay in Winterfell and send Brienne away. Brienne is essentially the only one there that's really able to protect her and have her best interests in mind, and she's just sending her off halfway across the country. It's a really perplexing move from Sansa, especially when Littlefinger, who is clearly lying to her, but still she trusts him, told her to keep Brienne by her side. So that leads to Sansa's weird behavior. Why did she make this decision? What basis did she have? Maybe we'll find out more, but if not, it's really confusing. And with her discovering Arya's masks and Arya acting like a sociopathic, insane person, this entire segment of the episode was just a complete mess. But putting the Winterfell segments aside, let's go to Dragonstone, where Peter Dinklage puts on a performance of a lifetime. He definitely deserves an Emmy for this episode. Any Emmy he could possibly win for this episode, he should take it. This is probably his second best performance in the entire show, behind the season 4 finale when he had to kill his own father. So Tyrion and Daenerys get into an intense argument about their clashing ideals. In my opinion, Tyrion is completely in the right here, and Daenerys is acting very hot-headed. She's so caught up with frustration, anger, and a fear that people are trying to betray her at every turn that she snaps at Tyrion. Now, the ending of this episode definitely harrows her, and I feel like she's going to be on solid terms with Tyrion because of such ending. This quality only continues later in the episode when Daenerys leaves to go beyond the wall to save Jon and company. The genuine fear that Tyrion expresses on his face in the face of Daenerys possibly losing her life is Emmy-worthy right there. When he says we're all lost if she dies, he's 100% right. Him, as well as all of Daenerys' key supporters, will be tortured and killed by Cersei if Daenerys were to fall. Tyrion will lose his life. Everything will be gone for him. All the hope he had will be completely shattered. And through his voice and expression, you see that. You don't even need to hear what he's saying. It just completely emotes off of him. And that's why this is one of the best performance scenes in the entire show. I probably like the Dragonstone segments almost as much as the Beyond the Wall segments, but here we are at the namesake sub-arc of the episode. Let's go Beyond the Wall. So the one-on-one or two-on-one conversations that sort of carry the traveling to the mountain part of this sub-arc are essentially just recap segments. They're cleverly spliced in to remind audiences of how all of these characters are interconnected and what's been going on between them to lead up to this point in the series. For those who didn't remember Gendry, they get a complete summary of his role in the story up till now. For those who don't quite remember who Thoros and Beric are, we get a summary of that as well. We even get a summary of Jon's connection to Jorah, which turns into more than just a simple recap. Jon, now getting to know Jorah and seeing how he's completely changed for the better, decides he wants to give him Longclaw, which, if you remember, Jorah's father, the former Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who Jon was a steward for, bestowed Longclaw upon him. Jorah was excommunicated from the family and he fled to Essos. Since Jorah really didn't have a son anymore, he gave it to the next person that came along in his life that filled that role for him, and that was Jon. I feel like this attempted passing on is somewhat reflective of Jorah's redemption in the story. After all of the bad things he's done before and throughout the series, he's sort of repented for himself, reflected upon his scenes, and reached true forgiveness from all of the other characters. He's completely redeemed himself in the eyes of Daenerys, the Northerners, and most importantly, in his own eyes. And I really think that's what this scene is trying to reflect. However, based on a subtle occurrence later in the episode, I feel like there's more to this scene that might become more relevant later, but I'll get to that soon. So after these wandering expository recap scenes, they come across a bear who has been turned by the White Walkers. This bear fight sequence was cleverly put in on the writer's behalf to remind audiences that, hey, the White Walkers can turn things that aren't human, which obviously becomes important at the end of the episode. Although we knew this was possible, it's been so long since we've seen any indicators of such that the audiences definitely did need a reminder. And I think they handle that reminder very well. The fight with the bear begins, and Beric and Thoros pull out flaming swords. This is really interesting because this is 100% a clear callback to Lightbringer. Exclusively show watchers may not understand what Lightbringer is and the whole Azor Ahai mythos for that matter. I will be making a separate video on the complete Azor Ahai lore sometime soon. However, what you need to know now is that when Melisandre refers to the prince that was promised, she's referring to this Azor Ahai mythology. And the original Azor Ahai carried a flaming sword known as Lightbringer. Now, popular consensus is that Jon Snow is Azor Ahai, so why wouldn't he be able to create this sword of all people? This could mean one of two things: that the show is A, completely ditching the Azor Ahai concept and just making Jon a sort of generic prophet for R'hllor, otherwise known as the Red God or Lord of Light, or it could be that Jon isn't Azor Ahai at all. Melisandre says Jon is the prince that was promised. However, she initially saw that Stannis was the prince that was promised and was wrong. What if she's wrong again? And if so, who would it be? Suspicions are Daenerys. She does fit a lot of the prophesized qualifications for Azor Ahai, especially with the whole emphasis that Azor Ahai is a gender-neutral concept. It could be the prince or princess that was promised. I personally still think it's Jon, but I'm definitely open to the idea that it might be Daenerys. However, because we already saw flaming swords, I don't think they're going to bring Lightbringer into the show, even if they still do Azor Ahai. I'm going to assume that Beric and Thoros were able to turn the swords into those that are flaming through Red God magic. It didn't seem like they had any oil matches or anything that could possibly light it on fire. The only possible explanation is divine magic. So after defeating the bear, they go and they finally got what they came for, a single white to capture and bring back to King's Landing. Now, there is an important distinction that I'm going to make here before we get into the rest of the events of the episode. White Walkers are only the guys in control. Those regal-looking blue people with the bright blue eyes and the white hair, those are White Walkers. The rest of the zombies are referred to as whites. Essentially, the White Walkers use a sort of hive mind mentality to control this entire army of the dead. This concept is sort of taught to us through this small straggling group of whites being led by one single White Walker. It is confusing as to why this group will be walking alone, separate from the pack, so to say. My first inclination is that these were newly turned people. They were recently turned into whites and therefore were being taken back to the pack by their turner. However, I then remembered that there is no longer anyone beyond the wall. So who would they have been able to turn? If you remember, all of the wildlings were relocated south of the wall into land in the north. That decision was the catalyst that led Jon's men to turn on him and kill him back in season 5. So if there was no one up there, that can't be the explanation, can it? This is a little bit of a plot hole here, but it's so nitpicky that I'm not even going to harp on it much longer. Another plot hole that emerges out of this scene is when Jon slays the White Walker controlling these whites, all of the whites die. This makes sense because of the whole hive mind control process. However, one white survives. Why was this white able to survive? If he wasn't one of the ones turned by this specific White Walker, why was he following that specific White Walker? It really doesn't make any sense. This entire sequence is immensely convoluted and filled to the brim with plot holes. However, this is just one small scene in the scope of things. Them killing that White Walker and capturing that white signals to the entire rest of the army of the dead that something is wrong, and they come rushing out and surround Jon and company. Before they are found and surrounded, Jon quickly sends Gendry out to go send a message to Daenerys signaling their plight. It's essentially their only hope at this point for defeating an entire army with like 6 or 7 people. I'm kind of sad Gendry was sent away so soon. We didn't even get to see him use the Warhammer, which was like a build-up that was completely anti-climatized. It was such a cheese to show it and then just completely disregard it. I don't know why the writers chose to do that. Maybe they could have used it a little bit on the bear, but they didn't even show that. One last complaint about plot holes, I promise. When the White Walkers arrive anywhere, everything around them freezes and turns to ice. This has been established in the show already. This poses the question, why did they have to wait around for the lake to freeze? Why was the lake liquid in the first place if they were so near? Wouldn't it have immediately completely frozen upon their arrival? It honestly seems like the writers forgot about this White Walker rule when writing this scene. However, it was really interesting to me that they had to wait around for the couple of days waiting for the lake to freeze. They were surrounded, so they were stuck there. If they tried anything, they would immediately get destroyed. The whites couldn't get to them because they would have just fallen through the ice into the water. So it was just this standoff, standstill kind of mind game for like a couple of days, which was kind of funny in a way. What wasn't funny, however, was that during this time, the injured Thoros freezes to death. This was a really anticlimactic death for someone like Thoros. I mean, this crazy, wild Red God worshipper just goes out by lying there frozen after being injured. And wouldn't Beric, his best friend, be a little bit sadder that he died? Like, your best friend dies. Wouldn't you be at least in tears, not just ready to move on with everything? I know he was a bit preoccupied with the surrounding White Walker forces, but even in that situation, I feel like you would be emotionally impacted by your best friend dying. It was just really sloppy writing, and it didn't make sense to me. Then, of course, the Hound has to be the idiot that throws rocks across to taunt the whites. And, of course, one of the rocks hits the ice, doesn't fall through, proving that the ice is completely frozen, allowing the whites to cross. This starts the battle between Jon and company and the White Walker forces. It's an intense battle, great scene. Tormund almost died. I was really nervous there, but, of course, he was saved, and he's still around to go back to Brienne. They have absolutely no odds here. It's just a complete cluster and mess. But then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, Daenerys arrives in what I would say is one of the best scenes in the entire show. This sequence was absolutely perfect. 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, whatever you want to give it. It's flawless. Seeing her controlling those dragons, burning hundreds upon thousands of whites was insane. But with this amazing intensity becomes tragedy. The Night's King throws a lance at one of Daenerys' dragons, killing it. That's right, one of Daenerys' children, one of her 3 dragons that she was going to use to conquer Westeros, is killed. For a non-human character, a dragon that never speaks, this actually made me pretty emotional. I didn't get teary-eyed or anything, but I was like really upset. With regards to the weapon used to kill him, my best theory is that this is a mix of dragonglass infused with Night's King magic. It's the only way this makes sense to me, because I don't think a dragon class lance would simply just be able to kill an entire dragon that effectively. There has to be something else to it, which is where I hypothesized the infusion of Night's King magic, possibly channeled directly from the Great Other. Again, I will do a video explaining the Great Other and the White Walkers very soon. Of course, Jon does not get on Drogon. He wants to give everyone time to board Drogon, so he goes back and continues the fight. When this whole death incident happens, Jon screams to leave him behind and go and save the rest of them. When Daenerys sees a second lance getting ready to be thrown, she finally agrees and flies off, at which Jorah almost falls off. And I for sure thought Jorah was going to die sometime beyond the wall. I thought this was it. This was going to be Jorah's death. They didn't kill him, which was very surprising to me. He lived. I'm surprised the showrunners took this route, because they are going to have to kill him sometime soon. However, I trust the showrunners. They must be holding that death off for something really climactic and really major. So Jon is now alone, left to fight the White Walkers. He ends up being dragged down into the depths of the water, about to be killed, but he is able to survive. He is able to emerge. And at this time, something I didn't notice, but something that's probably very important, occurs. This was actually pointed out to me by my dad after he read an article somewhere online. Longclaw, his signature sword, the one that was discussed earlier, was left on the side of the water. It looks normal. However, the second Jon is found sure to be okay and emerges from the water, the eye of the sword opens. I genuinely have no idea what this means and no idea what this represents. It's also not even emphasized with the camera work and the cinematography. It's so subtle that I missed it on my first time, and I'm sure most show watchers missed it too. Despite having no idea what it means, I do think it's going to be very important. This brings me back to the concept of Lightbringer. Now, Lightbringer was a flaming sword in the mythology, but what if they're changing the mythology for the show, so to say? What if devout Redguard worshippers all have flaming swords, and Lightbringer is something else? The sword itself may not actually be called Lightbringer. Lightbringer is more of a concept than a name. Therefore, my only possible theory as to what this means is that, what if Longclaw is Lightbringer, and Jon is confirmed Azor Ahai? We do not have enough information here. However, I don't think the showrunners would include that for no reason. I feel like it's going to be very important. I'm really, really dying to know what it means. I'm really looking forward to finding out, and I'm really looking forward to explaining it back to you guys. Jon is covered in freezing water, trying to fight off hundreds and hundreds of whites. He is close to his breaking point, and just then, out of nowhere, Benjen Stark arrives. Where was he this whole time? What was he doing? One of the main reasons why he didn't cross the wall with Bran was so he could stay behind and help in the fight against the White Walkers. So where was he during this physical confrontation with the White Walkers? What was he doing? What took him so long? Jon, who hasn't seen Benjen since season 1, finally gets reunited in an immensely brisk scene. This was a extremely quick reunion. It's just like, save, hello, good to see you, go. Jon goes before even getting to get 2 words, and he literally just says, Uncle Benjen, and that's it. Well, I guess that is 2 words. Benjen hoists him onto his horse and sends him off, leaving Benjen horseless and stuck to face this entire army all on his own. He takes out a couple, but then is overtaken. Rest in peace, Benjen Stark. Since he probably can't be burned here. He's probably going to turn into a White Walker, and Jon's probably going to have to fight his uncle. It seems like the logical progression here. I mean, he was already halfway turned into a White Walker, so why wouldn't the Night's King complete the process now that he has him back in his hands? And with that, we end the climax of this episode, and what may be the climax of the season. We end one of the absolute best sequences in the entire show to date. Everyone makes it back past the wall okay, other than Thoros, Viserion, and Benjen. Rest in peace to all those three characters. You will be greatly missed. Just when Daenerys thinks Jon didn't make it, of course he comes on back on the horse, passed out completely. Everyone leaves safely on a ship, presumably heading to King's Landing to go confront Cersei with the wife that they captured. Daenerys quickly flew with her dragons to Eastwatch. How does she have a Targaryen fleet ship just positioned at Eastwatch for her to take? My first inclination was that this was just simply a Night's Watch ship that she was borrowing. However, she hoists the Targaryen sail, the Targaryen banner on the ship, which really confuses me. Why would the Night's Watch just have a Targaryen banner? This really makes no sense and is indeed a plot hole. However, the fantastic scene we get with Jon and Daenerys inside the ship more than makes up for that hole. Before I had my hesitations, my skepticism, I did not want Jon x Daenerys to be a thing. I was adamant about that, but now I think I've completely changed my tune. I am full on board for Jon x Daenerys. Let the ship sail. I'm ready. They actually finally have chemistry now. It's insane. So obviously they have the emotional bond of this scene. Daenerys finally learns what Davos meant when he says Jon took a knife for his people. Jon finally understands Daenerys and her goals and ambitions, and they both concede to each other. Daenerys agrees to help Jon defeat the White Walker forces, while Jon agrees to bend the knee. Their conflict is finally resolved, and they become complete allies, further facilitating their romantic growth, and we get a fantastic ending to a fantastic episode. But wait, there's more. Now, I predicted this as soon as Viserion was slain and fell into the water, using chains that I guess they just got somehow. I don't know how the White Walkers got the chains, but they have them nonetheless. Small plot hole, but not enough to make me upset in any way. They fold Zerion's body out of the water, and of course the Night King walks up and turns him, making the first ice dragon that we have seen in both the books and the show. That's right, people. We finally have ice dragons. Now that the White Walkers have a dragon on their side, this conflict just got 10 times more intense. Previously, Daenerys would probably have been able to beat them with some casualties. It would have been a tough fight, but it would have been a victory. However, now hope is dwindling, and I really, really like that. This was a perfect ending to a 10 out of 10 episode. Like I said, one of the best in the series so far, probably my third favorite. I still need to reflect to confirm that position, but it likely will stay. Now, since this was just a robust and complex episode with a lot of content to cover, I probably missed some things, so if there's anything I missed, anything you'd like me to explain further at all or talk about in any form, please, I encourage you to comment below. I will respond or even make a video response, depending on the nature of your question. If you'd like to see more episode breakdowns of this nature or more further supplementary explanation videos, feel free to hit that subscribe button. If you like what you saw today, like this video, comment below, share it with your friends, share it on any social media platform you desire, whatever you prefer. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, you name it. I don't know how you'd share this on Instagram, but whatever. Really looking forward to the season finale next week. I can't believe it's already over and we're going to have to wait another year for only 5 more episodes, but this has been a tremendous season and a great ride. I hope you stick with me till the end. So thanks guys for watching, and remember, the Professor of Thrones is here to teach you.